Welcome to this explainer. Let's just start right off the bat with a pretty harsh reality. The world never plays fair. No matter how honest you are, eventually someone is going to betray you. No matter how skilled you become, someone way less qualified might just come along and take your spot. It's frustrating, right? But that is simply the reality we live in. However, according to our source material today, the people who actually understand this reality, they don't just survive it, they rule it. Today we're breaking down a fascinating concept called dark intelligence. Now I know, you hear the word dark and you probably instantly think of, villainy or manipulation. But the source frames this entirely differently. It frames it as essential defensive armor. It's basically the ability to build strength from betrayal and use quiet, psychological calculation to protect yourself against unfair play.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Think about it. Most people navigate life like they're playing checkers. They're emotionally reactive, they're predictable, and they are completely driven by their immediate feelings, right? When they get angry, they shout. When they feel threatened, they immediately start arguing. But a true survivor, they're playing chess. They are strategically intelligent and highly calculated. So while everyone else is out there just drowning in their emotions, the strategic thinker is calmly gathering information, they're staying quiet, and they are already planning 3 steps ahead.
To unpack all of this, we're going to organize these strategies into 4 main areas. First up, the weapon of silence. 2. Mastering emotional dynamics. 3. Ruthless pragmatism. And finally, number 4, the ethical strategist.
But before we really get into those pillars, let's officially define what we're talking about here. Dark intelligence is born when people get betrayed, humiliated, or defeated. While other people might completely break down from that kind of pain, you use it to build strength. But listen, the source sets a very, very firm boundary right from the jump, and it's one we are absolutely going to maintain throughout this entire explainer. This knowledge is for protection, not destruction. The whole goal here is to understand the game so you don't become a victim, not to learn how to become the villain. All right, let's get into Section 1, the weapon of silence, which is all about controlling information.
Consider this classic observation from Machiavelli. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This quote right here is the absolute foundation for what the source calls calculated opacity. It's this powerful understanding that you should never be completely 100% clear about your intentions, and you really only show the world what is absolutely necessary.
To see how this actually works in practice, let's compare complete transparency with calculated opacity. Just think about a totally standard conversation where a coworker asks about your weekend plans. Complete transparency is saying something like, "Oh, I'm just staying home, probably gonna watch some movies." I mean, it's honest, sure, but it completely kills any intrigue, and honestly, it's entirely forgettable. You're basically just giving away all your personal information for free. Now, consider the alternative. Calculated opacity. You simply say, "Oh, I have something important to take care of," and then you just naturally change the subject. By leaving a little gap in the story, you create mystery. And mystery, that creates undeniable influence, keeping you completely in control of the narrative. And this builds perfectly into the broader concept of controlled exposure. Humans are just naturally curious creatures. When we see an incomplete picture, our brains automatically try to fill in the blanks. And you can actually use this little quirk of human psychology to your massive advantage. By intentionally creating these curiosity gaps, you make people pay way more attention to you. Let's say you start a new job. Don't show off every single one of your skills in the first week. Reveal them gradually, so it looks like you are constantly growing and evolving. And hey, this extends to your digital footprint too. In a world where everybody is oversharing their breakfast on the internet, strategically curating what you actually put online makes your presence infinitely more valuable. It gives you a massive advantage in any negotiation. Now, what's really fascinating about this next concept is how it flips our normal understanding of power. Most people think power is loud, right? But real power actually whispers. This is what we call silent leverage. It's all about positioning yourself so that just your mere presence changes the entire dynamic of a room. For example, the very next time someone asks you a really difficult or pointed question, do not answer immediately. Just pause. Look at them thoughtfully. Let that silence stretch out for a second. This relies entirely on delayed gratification, and it shifts the whole weight of the conversation. It builds this quiet, undeniable power without you having to raise your voice even once. Moving right along to Section 2, Mastering Emotional Dynamics, specifically reading and reflecting.
We're going to return to Machiavelli just for a second to really ground this concept. A prince ought to take care that he may appear altogether merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious. This speaks to the absolute necessity of an adaptive persona. Basically, it means consciously adjusting how we present ourselves based entirely on the specific audience standing right in front of us.
Now, here is the crucial takeaway. You are not being fake here, you are just being effective. Think about it. You already speak differently to your grandmother than you do in a high-stakes job interview, right? An adaptive persona just makes this process intentional. If you're talking to a super analytical person, you give them facts and data. If you're talking to a highly emotional person, you connect with their feelings. This isn't manipulation, it's pure communication intelligence. Try to think of yourself like water. Water takes the exact shape of whatever container it's poured into, but it never stops being water. You adapt your presentation for sure, but you never ever lose your core values. But to perfectly adapt to someone, you really have to understand what they actually need from you. Every single person you meet is silently asking you 3 questions. Do you see me? Do you understand me? And do you value me? The source recommends this brilliant technique called the psychological echo to answer these questions. Let's actually slow down for a second and look at a real-world example of this. If someone comes up to you and complains, "Ugh, I hate my job," don't just jump in with some generic advice. Listen to the underlying emotion behind their words. You might reply with something like, "It sounds like you're really not feeling valued for your contributions." By echoing the emotion, instead of just parroting their words back at them, you make them feel deeply understood, and that builds a profound, almost therapeutic level of trust. And this brilliantly illustrates the other side of emotional mastery, the principle of detachment. See, desperate attachment is driven by fear, the fear of losing approval, losing a job, or losing a relationship. And that fear, it makes you weak and incredibly easy to manipulate. But detachment gives you absolute freedom. Imagine a business deal going down between 2 people. Person A desperately needs this deal just to survive. Person B really wants the deal, but they've got other options and are entirely willing to just walk away if they need to. Person B holds all the actual leverage there. They negotiate from a place of strength, because honestly, what you are not afraid to lose literally cannot control you. All right, let's jump into section 3, ruthless pragmatism, where we focus on executing outcomes. When it comes to actually executing those outcomes, Machiavelli hits us with a pretty harsh reality. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. True power doesn't always operate in neat little black and white boxes. Very often, it forces you to navigate these complex gray areas, where doing what is strictly necessary isn't always pretty. The source material actually calls this ambiguous morality. Now hold on, this does not mean having zero morals. It means making pragmatic decisions that serve the greater good, regardless of how harsh they might look on the surface. For example, imagine you manage a team and you find out one of your team members is constantly lying to your clients. The nice thing to do might be to give them endless second chances just to avoid a conflict. But the pragmatically ethical thing to do is to fire them, which protects your honest team members and your clients. Sometimes true kindness and truly effective leadership requires some really difficult, harsh truths. And you know, this pragmatic mindset leads us directly into what's known as outcome obsession. Think about how most people argue. They just argue to win. They want to prove a point. They want to look right, and they want to catch the other person in some minor contradiction. But a strategically intelligent person operates completely differently. When they enter a disagreement, they don't ask themselves, "How can I look good here?" Instead, they ask, "What result am I actually trying to achieve?" If your ultimate goal is to change someone's behavior, well, aggressively proving them wrong is only going to make them dig their heels in deeper. You have to focus entirely on the actual result you want, rather than the temporary ego boost of just winning a debate. To really master outcome obsession, it requires something called strategic laziness. Amateurs constantly confuse activity with achievement. They work tirelessly on all the wrong things just so they look busy. But strategic thinkers? They focus exclusively on the 20% of effort that yields 80% of the results. Furthermore, they attach themselves to the goals, not the methods. If a strategy just isn't working, they don't stubbornly stick to it just because they designed it. They easily and quickly change course. Why? Because they only care about the final outcome.
Which brings us to our final pillar, Section 4, the ethical strategist, power with responsibility.
Look, we all know that knowledge without application is basically useless, right? So, the source gives us some really actionable homework here. The 7-day challenge. I want you to think about all the traits we've covered today. Calculated opacity, building an adaptive persona, detachment, outcome obsession. Pick just one of them. Just one. And for the next 7 days, practice that single trait in your daily interactions. Start building up that defensive armor so you can stop being manipulated by the people out there who are playing the game against you. Ultimately, the most dangerous person in any room is the one who has absolutely nothing to lose.
But the most valuable person in the room? That's the one who genuinely understands human psychology and uses it to protect themselves while also serving the greater good. So I'll leave you with this to ask yourself: which kind of person do you choose to be? The constant victim of unfair play, or the ethical strategist who actually understands the game? Well, that is all for this explainer. Keep analyzing the world around you, and please make sure you are never caught playing checkers while everyone else